A 21-year-old college student left her dorm one afternoon and drove for hours, apparently heading to the White Mountains, without telling anyone where she was going or why she left. After a small one-car accident, she was unable to get her car started again. Various neighbors called 911, and another neighbor who drove by spoke with her. In a matter of just a few minutes, after the neighbors looked away from the accident scene and before the police arrived, she disappeared without a trace, and she has never been seen again for the last 17 years. Hi, I'm Mindy. Welcome to the Missing Link channel. Each missing person and unsolved mystery is just one missing link away from being solved. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a video and help us find that missing link. This is the third and final video in this series on the disappearance of Maura Murray. If you haven't watched the first or second part yet, you will want to watch it before continuing with this video. I will put a link to part 1 and part 2 above. Now, I hope at some point we will eventually make a true final video and have answers of what truly happened to Maura. I pray the family can get answers sooner rather than later. In the first video, we discussed the days leading up to Maura's disappearance, what happened the day of, speculated on why she left UMass that day, and discussed the possibilities of what happened to Maura after her accident on Route 112. In the second video, we discussed the timeline in more detail and jumped down the rabbit holes. There are so many side trails you can go down in this case. Many of these may not be related at all to the case, but they are important to at least discuss. Because Maura's mindset is so important. We do not know why she left Amherst that day. Knowing what happened in her life before the accident is definitely relevant. In this video, we will look into the possibilities in more detail of why Maura left Amherst that day, what happened to Maura after her accident on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, the possible suspects, if it was an abduction and murder, and what has happened with the case over the last 17 years. So let's jump right in. Why did Maura leave Amherst that day and head to the White Mountains? I see 4 possibilities. First, did Maura just want to get away for a few days or even a week? As we discussed in the last 2 videos, Maura definitely had some stressful events happen to her in the last couple years before her disappearance. She even had some stressful events in just the last few days before she left. We talked about her troubles at West Point, how she stole a credit card at UMass, how she wrecked her father's car, and we know she had to be worried about her sister Kathleen, not to mention the stress of nursing school. And we heard about how Maura was possibly having problems in her relationship with her boyfriend Bill. Maura's sister Julie has stated that Bill cheated on Maura. There is also some speculation that Maura may have cheated on Bill while she was at UMass. Second, was Maura headed up to the White Mountains to meet someone? Was she going to a party? She did buy quite a bit of alcohol before she left town. Was this alcohol just for herself to enjoy? Or did she buy it planning on sharing it with one or more other individuals? Not to jump down another rabbit hole, but there is a UMass cabin not far from where the accident was on Route 112. Some people wonder if Maura was headed in that direction to meet someone. Third, was Maura leaving for good? Had she packed up, headed out of town, running away to start a new life? Was she by herself, or was a friend following Maura in their own car to help her escape whatever she was running from? Fourth, was Maura headed up to one of her favorite places to end it all? Was the stress Maura was under too much? Was she planning on ending her own life? Do you think any of these make sense? Did Maura leave Amherst that day for another reason? We will get into which I think is most likely and go into more details on each of these possibilities when we talk about what happened to Maura after her accident on Route 112. So, just to recap, Maura's father came into town the weekend before her disappearance. They were looking for a newer car for Maura, because her car was smoking and had a broken cylinder. But they didn't have any luck getting a new car, and the $4,000 Fred bought just wasn't enough. So they planned on looking again at a later time. Then Maura went to a party that night in the dorms after she dropped her father off at his hotel room. At 3:30 a.m., Maura was leaving UMass and got into a one-car accident at a T intersection with her father's car. Maura was very upset with herself after this accident. Later that day, her father went home. The next day was Monday, February 9th, 2004, the day Maura would disappear. She called a couple places, possibly looking for a place to stay in the White Mountains. She emailed her professors and work supervisors, telling them that she wouldn't be in class or at work that week because there was a death in the family. Maura dropped off a lab coat to a fellow nursing student, went to the ATM, went to a liquor store, picked up the paperwork from the accident the day before, and headed out of town. A few hours later, after getting gas, she ended up on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. She passed an old weathered barn and came upon a sharp turn. Perhaps she was going too fast or hit a patch of ice, but her car spun out and she ended up facing the wrong way in the wrong lane. She either hit a snowbank or a tree. The airbags deployed in her car. There was a crack in the windshield. A red substance spilled inside her car, and the car wouldn't start. Neighbors called 911, and one neighbor even spoke to Maura. But when they stopped looking at the accident scene, and before the police arrived, Maura disappeared. And to this day, 17 years later, we do not know for sure what happened in those few minutes. But of course, there has been rumors and speculation over the last 17 years. As I stated in the first video, I can see 10 possibilities of what could have happened to Maura on the evening of February 9th, 2004, after her accident on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. First, was Maura injured in the accident and later died of her injuries after someone picked her up, either a stranger or someone she knew? Or maybe she went into the woods and perished from her injuries. Maura definitely could have been injured in the accident. The windshield was cracked and the airbags did deploy. Plus, it was February, and even though it was described as mild temperatures for this time of year, it was still cold, and it would have continued to get colder throughout the evening. However, the area was searched by search teams and dogs in the days to follow, and many times over the years. Would she really have gotten that far if she was injured? If she was intoxicated, could this have played a part in her disappearance? This definitely would have altered her judgment. I have heard some speculation on whether a stranger or someone she knew picked her up after the accident, and maybe she died from her injuries. But why wouldn't they get Maura help or call the police? They would have done nothing wrong. They would have just been trying to help Maura. Why would they hide her body, her belongings, and never tell a soul for 17 years? I just don't think that this is a likely scenario. I would assume if Maura was injured and later died, she wouldn't have gone that far into the woods. Plus, there were no footprints in the snow. I think the searchers, the dogs, or the helicopter that searched in the following days would have found Maura, or at least some of her belongings. But nothing was ever found in the woods near the accident scene. Second, was Maura hit by another vehicle while she was outside her car? Did this person put her inside their vehicle so they wouldn't get in trouble? When witness A first spoke out, there was speculation that Cecil Smith, the first police officer on the scene, always drove the police sedan, and that Chief Williams always drove SUV 001. When witness A claimed to see the SUV that night and not the sedan, people wondered if Chief Williams was there on the scene before Cecil Smith. Perhaps he either caused the accident or something more sinister. However, years later, Cecil Smith was interviewed and stated that he was driving the SUV that night. And Chief Williams explained that the SUV wasn't just his vehicle. Anyone could use it on any given night while patrolling. So if they are telling the truth, this helps clear up the speculation that the police were involved in her disappearance. The other problem I have with this theory is that multiple neighbors heard the first accident, the one where Maura spun out her car and either hit a tree or a snowbank. If there was another accident later, where Maura was either hit or injured from another vehicle, would at least one of the neighbors have heard anything or noticed activity with another car at the accident scene? They already knew that there was an accident outside their home. If any other noise caught their attention, I would think they definitely would have looked out their windows again. I don't think there is enough evidence to point to this theory, but we have to remember that Maura was a long-distance track and cross-country runner. Did she run farther down the road and walk into the woods outside of the original search area? But they did extend the search over the years, and still nothing was ever found. Third, was Maura running away from her life and a friend was following behind Maura in another vehicle? And after Maura's accident, did she get into their car? This has been James Renner's theory all along. He wrote a book on Maura's disappearance. He called this the tandem driver theory. He believed that one or more of Maura's friends was following behind Maura in their car that day. They were planning on helping Maura run away, possibly to Canada. They would have helped Maura get settled in before returning without her. Remember, Renner thought that Maura could possibly be pregnant. He believed she was running away from her boyfriend. Renner believes that after Maura's accident, her friends pulled up to the accident scene, and Maura jumped in their car. Renner claims that Maura and two other women were seen in a convenience store in Haverhill buying alcohol 30 minutes before the accident. He was apparently told that the women used out-of-state IDs. However, State Trooper Monahan watched the surveillance video from that night and did not see Maura on any videos. So most likely, it wasn't Maura. And I would guess that people using out-of-state IDs would be common in this area. With all the ski resorts, it would definitely be a popular area for tourists. I have a few issues with the tandem driver scenario. If the cars were in tandem, wouldn't they be following each other fairly close? The neighbors never talked about a second car, and the bus driver, Butch Atwood, never mentioned another car either. So for this to be true, the tandem vehicle would have had to be pretty far behind. They would have had to pull right up after Butch left, but before the police arrived. That was a short window. Maura's family always talks about how close they were. Why would Maura leave her family? Plus, she didn't come back when her mother was dying of cancer. Why wouldn't she have contacted someone in the last 17 years? There have been no confirmed sightings of Maura. If she has been out there the last 17 years, wouldn't she have been at least spotted? Plus, no one ever mentions that Maura's friends were missing for an extended period of time. If these friends were her tandem driver, they would have been gone for at least a couple of days. Wouldn't someone have noticed that Maura's friends were gone around the time of her disappearance? Fred was asked in an interview what his feelings would be if Maura did run away, and his answer, "Great, that would mean she is alive." As much as I hope Maura is alive, I just don't think this is the likely scenario. Fourth, was the accident planned? Did Maura and a friend stage the accident so people would think Maura was kidnapped or murdered so she could escape and start a new life somewhere else? This scenario is related to the third scenario. The timing would have had to be perfect for her friends to pick her up right when the neighbors weren't watching and before the police arrived. Plus, this would be an extreme scenario. And why would they plan the accident around so many houses? I would think they would plan the accident where no one could see. Fifth, did a good Samaritan pick Maura up and drop her off somewhere else, and then something happened to Maura? This is probably not likely, but it would help explain a few things. Perhaps Maura was picked up where the dogs lost her trail. This would also explain why her body has never been found in all of the searches around the accident scene. If Maura was taken to another area, her body could be anywhere, perhaps very far away. 6th, was Maura headed up to that area to meet friends at a party? Or did a group of locals pick up Maura to go to a local party? Perhaps she died at that party. There is a lot of speculation on this scenario. People claim that Maura was cheating on Bill and that she was going up to this area to meet this man. There were rumors that Maura went to a party that night and died from alcohol poisoning. However, there is no evidence to point to this scenario. Also, why did she make calls to make a reservation if she already had plans to meet someone there? Wouldn't she have already known where she was staying? 7th, was Maura going for a quick getaway, but after the latest accident on Route 112, was she so overwhelmed that she didn't want to go on? A lot of other things have happened to Maura over the last couple of years, which we discussed in the previous videos. Was the accident the final straw that pushed Maura over the edge? Maybe the final accident was just too much for Maura. I am sure she was very afraid, being by herself, with no cell service, and her car wouldn't start. We will discuss this in the next scenario as well, since they are related. 8th, did Maura go to New Hampshire to end it all? Did she want to end her life in her favorite place, the White Mountains, where she had so many wonderful memories growing up with her family? Did she walk into the woods and eventually perish due to the cold weather? This could definitely be a possibility, but we won't know for sure until Maura is found. However, there are some things that Maura did before she left that would point away from suicide. First, she had future plans. She was planning on going to a concert with her friends and taking a trip with her sister Julie over spring break. Also, Maura did her homework the night before she left, and she took school books and supplies with her. If this was her plan, why would she worry about homework? Her friend said that Maura seemed fine. Maura made one final stop on campus before she left. She called a fellow nursing student whom she had previously borrowed a lab coat from. This friend said Maura was going to drop off the lab coat, that she had to go home for a family emergency, something about her sister. This friend fell asleep and heard a knock on her door. However, she didn't get up to answer the door, but when she did wake up, she found the lab coat in a bag in the hallway. Maura must have dropped it off. I wonder what the discussion would have been had the friend answered the door, or did Maura just knock and walk away? Would we know more today about Maura's plans, where she was going, who she was meeting, or why she was leaving, if that friend had opened the door when Maura knocked? If Maura had died in the woods around the accident scene, wouldn't her body have been found? The smell from a deceased body has the greatest scent for the first 3 months, of course, depending on weather and where the body is located. However, dogs have found human remains after the person has been deceased for centuries. A cadaver dog's owner was interviewed, and she thought that if Maura's body was in the woods around the accident scene, that the dogs would have found her on one of the many searches, especially if Maura died and her body was still above ground. Apparently, Fred said something to one of the officers shortly after Maura's disappearance about it possibly being suicide. Officer Cecil Smith claims that Fred said that Maura was depressed and may have done the old squaw, which would mean going into the woods and passing away. But soon after, the family changed their opinion, and they didn't believe that this was a likely scenario. Some people speculate that if it was suicide, the police wouldn't look as hard for Maura or would stop looking altogether. I can't imagine receiving the news that Fred received, that your daughter is missing, that her car was abandoned, and they have no idea where she went. I wonder if Fred originally said this as a defense mechanism. With all the possibilities that could have happened to Maura, some awful possibilities, falling asleep in the woods would have been the least awful possibility. If Maura did walk into the woods that night to end it all, how far would she have gotten? Wouldn't she have been found in all the searches over the years? I know it isn't a guarantee that she would have been found, but wouldn't something have been found? Wouldn't her backpack, her wallet, or her phone have been found? But nothing has ever been located. Plus, there were no footprints found in the snow. The search started 1.5 days after the accident. It hadn't snowed any more since that night. There was 2 feet of snow on the ground. Wouldn't she have left a path or footprints if she did go into the woods? The searchers claim they saw no footprints. They searched 10 miles out and never found a trace of Maura or any of her belongings. The searchers believe she never left the roadway. Dogs searched twice, and one of those searches had 7 dog teams. Let's look at what Maura had in her car. Some things may point to one possibility of what Maura was doing in New Hampshire, but other things point in a completely opposite direction. Maura had 6 boxes of sleeping pills in her car, and one of them was empty. Some wonder if she took a lot of sleeping pills and wandered into the woods. But once again, how come she was never found, or any of her belongings? In her car was also a lot of clothes and supplies for a getaway, plus school books. And why would she have taken school books if she never was planning on returning? Fred did say that Maura was very upset after she crashed his car the weekend before her disappearance. In fact, she was very upset when Fred dropped her off at her dorm room, which was the last time Fred saw his daughter. So sad that his last memory of Maura is her walking into her dorm very upset. Fred changed his mind about what happened to Maura pretty fast after her disappearance. He says that he regrets mentioning the old squaw and wishes he had never told this to the police. He doesn't believe that she committed suicide that night. And I would have to say that I probably agree with him, because I truly believe that a search or one of the dogs would have found Maura. But the fact that her body or any of her belongings has never been found over the last 17 years, it isn't likely that she died in the woods surrounding the accident scene. 9th, was Maura headed up to that area to get away for a few days, and did another car pull up after the accident and kidnap Maura? Perhaps a neighbor? This is definitely a possibility. Many people believe that Maura just needed a break and was planning on going up to the White Mountains for a few days to relax and clear her head, with the intention of returning back to UMass. Maura loved New Hampshire. Bill, Maura's boyfriend, thought that maybe she was trying to get away and take a break and go somewhere she loved. He said that it was her home away from home. She had so many fond memories there growing up. She has a definite connection to the White Mountains. A lot of family members believe this scenario as well, and they believe this is exactly what happened to Maura. Julie, Maura's sister, believes that Maura may have accepted a ride from a stranger, especially that night in the predicament she was in. Julie said they always felt safe in that area, and everyone was always so nice. Kathleen, Maura's oldest sister, thought that maybe Maura needed to get away, that maybe this had something to do with Maura crashing her father's car. Kathleen said that the accident definitely upset Maura, and Maura was even crying about it. Could this be a possibility? I have always wondered. What if Maura went into the woods before Cecil Smith arrived? What if she watched from the woods that night? The police state that the woods were never searched that evening. Maybe she started down the road after everyone left and no one was watching. Could she have been abducted then? But once again, wouldn't there have been footprints? If she was abducted, how did the neighbors not hear her scream? I would assume if someone was trying to abduct Maura, she would have screamed or fought back. But maybe she was abducted further down the road. Did she walk down the road avoiding the police? And was she abducted there, in a more secluded area? Did she go farther down the road to avoid the police, and this is why the neighbors didn't notice another car pull up, or Maura disappear? Was Maura walking down the road, and lights came up behind her from another car, and the car pulled over, and this person took Maura? I definitely think this is a possibility. Maybe they had a weapon. and Maura didn't scream? Or 10th, did an opportunistic serial killer come across the accident scene and abduct and murder Maura? Some people claim how unlikely it would have been for this person to drive by that night at the exact right time to find Maura alone and no one watching. However, people vanish all the time. It is just bad luck. Wrong time, wrong place. I think this is definitely a possibility. Do you think one of these scenarios is what happened to Maura? Do you think something else happened to Maura that night? Kathleen, Maura's oldest sister, stated in an interview, "We aren't going to stop searching until we find Maura." And this is exactly what her family has been doing over the last 17 years. Kathleen said that Maura was a trailblazer. She was always leading the group. Kathleen also said it was very rare to see Maura upset or sad. She said Maura always came to her sisters for advice and guidance. It is so sad Maura didn't come to her sisters before she left. I am sure Maura didn't want to tell her sisters because they may have tried to stop her from leaving. In an interview, Fred was asked why he thought Maura was on Route 112 that night. He said that he doesn't know, and he doesn't know why she left. He is right. No one has any idea why Maura left UMass and headed into New Hampshire on Route 112, unless someone does know, but they aren't saying. All we can do is speculate about what we think most likely happened. But until Maura is found, or someone comes forward and confesses, we will have no way of knowing for sure. Maura's friend Kate has not spoken out, but she did talk to Fred years ago. Apparently, she told Fred what happened to Maura and what Maura did the weekend before she disappeared. They apparently discussed the party that has drawn so much speculation. Fred hasn't stated what Kate told him, but he says that he believes her. Bill, Maura's boyfriend, explained that it wasn't unusual for Maura to take solitary trips. He described her as very independent and took multiple solo trips to come visit him. She also enjoyed running and ran by herself quite frequently. Locals around the accident scene even think Maura was abducted. So as we discussed earlier, Renner thinks Maura was running from her life, that her life was falling apart. He claims that so many people in the case are lying. He thought that Maura was running away from her boyfriend and her family. Maura's family denies any of these allegations. Even Renner is now starting to think that Maura may actually be deceased. Maura's car is still in the impound lot. It has been moved several times. Currently, it is outside in an impound lot. It seems to have more damage on it now. It definitely looks in rough shape. You can see front end damage, the window is cracked, the airbags deployed. There are still empty food containers inside, and fingerprint dust all over the inside of the vehicle. There is still a UMass sticker on the car. The car is the last connection to Maura. I wonder if it held any evidence that was missed in the investigation. On the show, The Disappearance of Maura Murray on the Oxygen Network, Maggie and Art followed Maura's route. We talked about this in part 1. They stopped by the ATM and the liquor store, just as Maura did. Then they headed north to Haverhill. They assumed Maura left at 3:45 p.m. They wanted to see how long her drive would have taken. It took them 2 hours and 39 minutes. They arrived at the accident scene at 6:20 p.m. They felt that there was a missing hour. However, we know she stopped at the DMV or courthouse to get the accident paper from the accident with her father's car, because it was found in her car after the latest accident. Plus, she stopped to get gas. So I wonder how much time those two things would have taken. Maybe she just drove slower than they did. Maybe she stopped to grab food or use the restroom. I think this hour can easily be explained. As we know, Maura stopped by the liquor store before leaving town, and she could have brought alcohol from her dorm room as well. She had a box of red wine, Bailey's, and 8 vodka wine coolers from a 12-pack. I wonder what was purchased at the liquor store compared to what she brought from her dorm. The police haven't released the liquor receipt. Do you think Maura purchased and brought the alcohol for herself? Was she meeting someone in New Hampshire, or was she going to a party? Do you think Maura was drinking and that caused the accident? Or do you think she wasn't drinking, but was worried the police, who were likely on their way, would assume she was drinking? Do you think this was a reason of why Maura left? Was she worried about getting in more trouble? I know she was a college kid, but I still find it odd that she left UMass so late in the day. It was February, and it gets dark early in February. It didn't seem that she had a reservation to know exactly where she was going that night. Did she know exactly where she was going? Or was she just driving? It was getting late in the evening by the time the accident happened. Where was she going? Did she find a place to stay before she left? And did she know exactly where she was headed? Or was she meeting someone at a specific location? But then again, why call those places earlier in the day if she was meeting someone? Or was she looking for a place for both of them to stay? Maybe that other person found a place for them to stay that night, and Maura was driving there. If they both left UMass or that general area, why didn't they drive together? And why wouldn't they take another car? Why would they take Maura's car? Remember, Fred talked about how Maura's car barely ran. Why would they have taken her car and drive it for hours to the White Mountains? We now know that on Route 112, Maura came from the west and was heading east. It is unlikely that the police knew which direction Maura came from. However, it is likely that she lost control on the turn, so the police could likely speculate that she came from the west. The police only searched west of the accident scene, even though the police already had come from that direction, from the west, as they were driving to the accident. They never went to the east. Butch was located towards the east, but he never saw her again. Did Maura go in the opposite direction and head east that night, and that is why they never found anything? Fred has always been so upset that they never went east past Butch's house. He wonders that if anyone had searched that area that night, would Maura have been found? There is a lot of speculation when it comes to possible suspects in this case, if it was an abduction and murder. We will discuss a few. First, Butch Atwood. Remember, he was a bus driver who came upon the accident scene and spoke to Maura. Butch was an older gentleman and not in the best of shape. Maura was a lot younger and in great shape. Would Butch have been able to overpower Maura and abduct her? Unless she did accept a ride in his school bus and into his home. Butch mentioned that Maura's hair was down when he spoke with her. People thought this was odd because she always wore her hair up, and it was up in the ATM photos. However, why would he lie about this? Maybe she had just taken down her hair and was putting it back up when he drove by. Or maybe her hair came loose in the accident. Also, when Butch was shown a picture of Maura soon after the accident, he says it wasn't her. But maybe the photo he was shown didn't look exactly like Maura would have looked that night. In the photo, she was likely smiling, and maybe she had her hair and makeup done. However, at the accident site, she would have been nervous, scared, definitely not smiling. I can see why he wasn't sure about her identity. However, later he claimed that the person he spoke with was Maura. Butch took 2 polygraph tests. The first was inconclusive, and the second he passed. Butch has since passed away. I always hear people say that Butch was the last person to see Maura alive. Butch is the last person who we know of that saw Maura alive. But if Maura was abducted and murdered, then the murderer would be the last person to see Maura alive. Second, the police were involved. I think we covered this in the scenarios of what happened to Maura. I think the questions have been answered when it comes to police involvement, and I doubt they were involved. Third, Bill, Maura's boyfriend. At the time of her disappearance, Bill was in Oklahoma, 1,700 miles away. The only way Bill could be involved was if Maura was hiding from him, and he later found her when he came up after she disappeared. However, friends and family claim that he was with them the entire time in the weeks after Maura's disappearance, when everyone was looking for Maura. Fred has mentioned numerous times that he liked Bill. Bill has had some legal trouble for the last couple of years. We could talk about this for a long time, but if Bill didn't have the opportunity to hurt Maura, then his legal issues just wouldn't be relevant. Fourth, a neighbor or someone in the area abducted Maura. They would have definitely had an opportunity, since she was pretty much trapped in the area. Her car wouldn't start, and I'm sure she was frightened. Even Maura's sister Julie thought she might accept a ride from a stranger. Another neighbor, named Rick Forcier, who lived across the street from Butch Atwood, claimed to see Maura about 5 miles away that night, running down the street. He wouldn't let the police search his property. It was finally searched after he moved years later. I wonder why the police didn't get a warrant to search earlier, since he admitted to seeing her that night. A lot of speculation about him could have been cleared up with an earlier search. Fifth, the Loon 3. Dick Guy, the EMT that came on the scene the night of Maura's disappearance, spoke about this theory. Apparently, there were 3 men who worked at Loon Mountain, which was a mountain ski resort not far away. They would have driven past the accident scene that night, on the way home from work, and apparently they didn't show up to work the next day after the accident either. It has been speculated that maybe they picked up Maura and took her to a party where she later died. I am sure the police would have looked into this theory. Sixth, a tandem driver or whoever Maura was meeting that night. Is it possible that there was a tandem driver and that person picked up Maura after the accident? This would help explain how she left the scene so fast, and she would have easily gotten to that person's vehicle. There wouldn't be much commotion. She would have been willing to get inside. I always thought that if Maura was approached by a stranger, it would have taken longer for her to get into their vehicle, and this would be more time for a neighbor to notice. Plus, if they forced her to get into their car, Maura may have tried to run, fight back, or scream, and this would have alerted the neighbors. Seventh, the man in the A-frame house. There was an A-frame house about a mile from the accident scene. People wonder if Maura came upon the house or was taken there that night. 2 brothers lived in the house at the time. One of the brothers thought the other brother was involved. This brother turned over a bloody knife to Fred. Fred gave the knife to the police. I am sure the police would have checked if the knife truly had human blood on it, and if so, they would have tested it for DNA. Years later, dogs were taken to this home, and they had a hit in the upstairs closet. After new ownership, more searches were conducted of the home, and it looked like blood was on the wood paneling. It was found in a closet, such a weird place to find blood. It was tested by the Oxygen documentary. They found that it was human blood. There were 2 different individual DNA in the sample. They were able to determine that one was from a male, but unable to tell if the other sample was from a male or a female. When they ran a DNA test on the sample, it was too small of a sample to be conclusive as to whether it was from Maura. Searches continue for Maura, and they have been regularly conducted over the last 17 years. Ground-penetrating radar has been used in certain areas, but unfortunately nothing has ever been found. There was a GoFundMe account that was started by Julie, Maura's sister. The GoFundMe account states that the fund was set up to help the family conduct multiple searches with trained professionals using a variety of tools and techniques. The family wants to continue the GoFundMe efforts to raise additional funds to conduct laboratory testing of samples previously collected with the hopes of uncovering evidence needed to provide closure after all these years. Someone knows something. The GoFundMe has raised $11,600. I will put a link in the description box below. There is an additional GoFundMe account started by Maggie Freeling from the Oxygen documentary. The website states that this GoFundMe was set up to raise as much money as we can as a community to use ground-penetrating radar on the A-frame house and some other areas of interest. They are also raising additional reward money for information leading to Maura. This GoFundMe has raised $10,318. I will also put a link to this GoFundMe in the description as well. Of course, besides Maura's disappearance, there has been some additional sad news to come from this case over the last couple of years. Cecil Smith, the first officer on the scene, committed suicide on February 20th, 2019, at the age of 65. There was speculation that this had to do with Maura's disappearance, but his family spoke out and said that he was sick, perhaps Alzheimer's. I know a lot of people researching this case have been hard on the police, and yes, maybe their investigation fell short, but it was a small town, and I am sure they were definitely overwhelmed. But it is sad that Cecil's life came to an end this way, not long after he was interviewed in the Oxygen documentary. But thank goodness he was interviewed, because he cleared up a lot of speculation. If he wasn't interviewed, he would have taken this information to the grave with him. The latest news from the case happened just a couple of days ago. The tree near the accident scene has always been a memorial to Maura. There has been a blue ribbon, which was Maura's favorite color, placed around the tree for years. That tree was cut down, and many of the trees around it as well. The memorial to Maura is no longer there. I know it was just a tree, but it was a connection to Maura and where she was last seen. I am sure this has to be hard for the family. They held memorials at this site each year. The family has been trying to get a permanent historical marker at the accident site on Route 112. Julie told a news reporter, "We don't have any ashes to spread. We don't have a grave to visit. Visitors don't have anywhere to honor Maura. My family has nowhere but this location where she was last seen alive. So we want to memorialize her and honor her in this spot." The case has definitely haunted me over the years. It is definitely one of the cases I know the most about. I just picture Maura standing outside her car after it wouldn't start following the accident, in the cold February air, in the darkness with only the moonlight surrounding her, knowing that the neighbors likely called 911, knowing the police were on their way, and knowing she didn't want to be there when they arrived, fearing she would get in more trouble. What was going through her mind? And what happened next? I will never forget an interview years ago with Fred. He talked about all the times he has searched for Maura. There was a video played on him searching. It showed him going over to a dumpster and looking inside. How awful that would be. Praying you wouldn't find your daughter, because if you did, she would be gone. But on the other hand, praying you would find your daughter, so you could lay her to rest and give her peace. Maura's family deserves answers, and Maura deserves justice. If you want more information on Maura's case, I would definitely recommend the Oxygen documentary and the Missing Maura Murray podcast by Tim and Lance. The links are in the description box below. I hope that someday I can do another video on Maura's disappearance with the final answers on what happened to Maura. Julie and Fred have both stated that the family knows a little more than the community about what happened to Maura. Perhaps it is another piece of evidence, or something only the abductor or killer would know. I have always wondered what this piece of evidence or more information might be. What do you think it is? In an interview with Fred a few years ago, he ended his interview speaking to Maura directly. He said, "We are coming, kid. We will find you." This interview just broke my heart. Thank you for joining me here today. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button so I know you enjoy hearing about missing person cases. Also hit the subscribe button and the bell so you'll be notified of my future videos. And follow me on social media as well to see what I am working on next. As always, have a wonderful day. Watch out for each other and keep looking for that missing link. Love ya, and see you in my next video.